Bum, ba-dum, bum, ba-bum, dum, 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 dum. Today is election day, so who are you voting for? All right, so I voted. Anyway, today we are going to do a little bit of motion blurring. All right, so thanks to Martin Fleming for asking the question, how do I create the motion blurs that look realistic? That's an oxymoron in my So before we get started here, let's take a look at photillustrator.com/photillustrator blog. You can go and check out all the articles that I write, videos that I create, which I try to do once to twice a week. Most of the time pretty successful. That's a big task. Anyway, go to Facebook and follow or like Photillustrator. They're at Photillustrator, and then also on Instagram. Love Instagram, love Instagram. That's my favorite social media platform is Instagram. I don't know why, but I love it. So anyway, go and follow me there on Instagram. Now let's get into some good stuff here today, which is how to do a convincing motion blur. Now I've already done one tutorial on creating a realistic motion blur, and to be quite honest with you, it's not really realistic. That's just what I knew at the time. So you know, as I grow in my skill levels and as I grow in my artistic abilities, whatever, that type of thing, things change for me as well. And so as things change for me, I love getting the questions which inspire me to create videos like we have here. So let's talk a little bit real quick about motion blur and using motion blur within a composited piece of photography, all right? In my opinion, there's a couple of different types of composite photographers. There are the photorealistic type of compositors, and then there are the, for lack of better ways to say it, not real photorealistic composite photographers. You can go into fantasy, you can go into horror, you can go into a lot of different genres of composite photography that are not photorealistic. So with a photorealistic composite, motion blur will not work. And if you are a guy or a person who loves photorealistic composites, then you know motion blurs are going to look a little strange to you. And I use a lot of photorealism in my composites. Usually it's on a. Let me show you on a. This is one that I just released, you know, not too long ago. So of Odin Clack of Odin leather. All right. So, you know, this is a before image and this is an after. So I use, I think 3 or 4 different images to bring together to create the final product here. And of course, going for a more photorealistic vibe. Clearly on this type of scene, I would never use a motion blur. Of course, I would never have things moving through a scene on that type of portrait either. So motion blur works really well for the non-photorealistic type of images. And so this is what we're working with today. This image I just released or just delivered to the family. It's called Lake House Fun. And this is their new lake house. And we want to create this fun, high energy scene around their lake house because this is what they experience. You know, when they go out to their lake house, they have a lot of fun, a lot of energy, they love life, and they just wanted to express that in a portrait. And so the best way to do that is just to create a lot of action, a lot of motion in a portrait, a lot of smiles and happy feelings, that type of thing. So this is where we ended with this portrait. This is the actual portrait that I delivered to them in a 50-inch. So we take that away and we're going to go down to, we're going to work specifically here on Quinn, the little girl, and then also on this lure. So you can see from what we delivered and the motion blur that we had here and the motion blur that we had here versus floating things in the air, which looks a little strange to me. So anyway, let's start with Quinn here. So Quinn, we're going to make a copy of her real quick, Command J. And then I'm going to drop her behind, the copy here behind, because this is going to be our, let's just call it first blur. Actually, let's call it camera blur. I call it a camera blur. A lot of times when you look at a photo of something moving, you get this slight halo type of blur around them, and that's what we're going to create here. And then we're going to go here and make another copy and then drop it above the camera blur. And we're just going to make this the motion blur. All right, so with the camera blur, we're going to go up here to filter and we're going to go to blur gallery. All right, this is I used to do a motion blur. Let's do a motion blur real quick here so I can show you that and just do an old school motion blur. So this is how I used to do it. And I have a tutorial on how to create realistic blurs. And this is how I did it then. And now it's probably been about a year ago. And so we're going to come here to our blur and then Gaussian, or not Gaussian blur. We don't want that. That would not make any sense, would it? We're going to go to blur. We're going to go to motion blur. And then with motion blur, we're going to use this piece here and we're going to make sure, let's just line it up here and make sure that it's coming from the chair. So we can move it any way we want. We just want to line it up visually with that so we can create that look. We can increase our pixels, which is going to bring it further out, that type of thing. The problem with motion blur using this is you get a blur on both sides. And I don't really care for that effect. All right. So that's like if something were vibrating back and forth, you would get this type of blur. Now, what I would used to do is I'd take that blur and I would move it like that to where it didn't show up. And then I would take an eraser here and make sure that you're at 100% on both flow and opacity, and then just erase that side there. Okay. So that made a little bit more sense, but we still have a pretty distinct edge here, which I don't care for. And you can go in here and try to erase it out a bit like that. And you can create a pretty convincing blur like that. That's not entirely bad. All right. So let's drop this below here. And then we're going to put this into a folder of its own, Command G. And then we're going to go to camera blur here. So camera blur, we're going to go to filter, blur gallery, and then path blur. And the key to this is on the path blur, we're creating that camera blur, that thing that looks like when something's moving fast, you get a little halo type of blur. That's what we're going to go for here. So we're going to create a centered blur. We're going to keep that checked. And that's just going to give us a small little halo. Now, what I would do here is instead of having 50% speed, maybe take that down into the 30 range. That's going to decrease this distance here between the outside of the blur and the actual subject. All right, so that looks pretty good right there. We're just going to go with it. Takes a little while for the computer to catch up with your artistic eye. So we're going to go right there. And then we have that kind of that halo effect blurred. And then we can drop that down to, I don't know, whatever you want, 80%, whatever feels right. It's all about feeling. We create based on feelings, not on technical applications. That's crazy and retarded. That would never be something I would do. All right, so then we go back up here to blur gallery, path blur. We're going to use our little arrow here, which we did not do on the other blur, and we should have, but we didn't. So that's the way it goes. And then we can create, so she's not just flying up like straight, all right? She's flying up at an arc. That's how that would happen. That's how it would happen in my world. So that's how I'm going to make it happen. All right, so we're going to use the middle connector here, and we're going to pull that line into an arc. That's pretty cool. We're going to take away the center blur because we don't want that center blur. We want it to actually be coming from this area. So the blur will occur in the direction of that arrow. Muy importante to know that. So we're going to bring this speed down again to the 30s area because I don't like too much speed. It begins to look a little gnarly when there's too much speed. Cool. So let's just go with that for now. So let's go with that. And 3, 2, 1, boom. There we go. That's crazy town. That is crazy. Crazy, horrible, right? Looks too much. All right, so we're just going to use our opacity and change it based on what we want there. All right, so we got that. The other thing is, let's make a copy of that real quick, and let's do a Command T to select it, and then warp, and then right now we're just going to drag it down. This is kind of what I was going to show you with the lure one too. So this can kind of give you more of an effect of flying faster or flying however, right directly from this there. All right, so we're going to go there. Now we need to drop that down even further in opacity, something like that. And then you could take this blur here and copy it again and then bring it up above her, above Quinn. And then let's attach it to her because we don't want that to bleed over. And then we can select our erase tool and then just go in here and erase the edge. The thing is, you don't want to erase right up to the blur edge, all right? You want to keep a little bit of blur on that side, all right? So let's keep all that. And let's just right there like that. Because realistically, you are going to have some blur over the skin. Realistically, on this unrealistic blur, we're going to have some spillover on the skin, all right? So just like that. I'm just erasing away some of these blur effect here. All right, I want to make sure that I keep it a little bit overlapping the arm there. Okay, so that's not too bad. Not too bad. You see how we get the arc there? That's good. I like that arc because it symbolizes that we're coming from down there. All right, so let's go real quick up here to the lure. Actually, real quick, let's do this. So that's the difference. That's our blur with just the old school motion blur, and this is our blur with the other way, the other method. And if you don't like that, if that's too powerful, you can even bring that down by bringing the whole group down. Whatever, again, whatever makes you feel good about yourself. One thing is, we get caught up in too much garbage about how things should look technically and all this kind of stuff. We're just trying to sell ideas here on this kind of thing. We're just trying to sell a convincing scene idea. All right, so let's go with the lure here. Let's make 2 copies. Again, we're going to use one for our camera blur. We'll use copy 1 for our camera blur. I'm going to do this real quick here. So motion gallery there. And make sure that we got the right angle. So the lure is going to be coming from down here somewhere. I'm going to bring this down to in the 30s, 20s, 30s. I don't care. Something like that. Okay. Let the computer catch up with it. That wasn't quite enough. Let's go back here and do one more. Blur gallery. I'm not going to bring the strength down at all. I'm just going to, or the speed down. I'm just going to go right there like this. Because I like that a little bit better. I like having just a little bit more of an edge like that around the lure. And then we're going to go up here to our next one. Here I'm going to show you a different thing. We can add some noise onto that sucker. I already have those set. Those seemed like a pretty fair noise addition. We're going to go to blur gallery. We're going to go to path blur again. And now we're going to go to here. We're going to create that. Maybe not quite that much. I like that. Just kind of line it up there. And then I can create a little bit of an arc to it, because we know it didn't just go straight up. It actually arced up, because that makes sense. We're going to take our center blur off, because we want it to trail the object, not halo the object. And so once we get all that going, that'll be good. We can bring our speed up just a little bit on this sucker, because it's going faster. push yes, click OK, you agree. All right, so here we go. This is going to get cool now. Command T to select it. We are going to select warp, and then we're just going to drag that tail out here. That is kind of gnarly and kind of cool. Boom, I like that. That's kind of cool, right? Okay, so we'll put okay, I agree with that. And then we're going to drop that opacity down, and you can see that you get real subtly an idea that that thing is flying fast through the air. All right, that's pretty cool. Now I know there was a couple of things here that we I didn't care for. All right, just like that. Cool. I almost think that looks better than the original. Awesome. So that's how we create motion blurs, convincing motion blurs. Now, convincing in the effect that we want to sell an idea. We want to sell the idea that things are moving through a scene really fast and not just floating. Okay, so in a fantastical type of portrait like this, or fantastical type of composite, use motion blur to sell your ideas. Now, I hope this answers your question, Martin, on how to create these blurs and to sell these ideas. The most important thing that I can't emphasize enough is that this is not photorealistic. This is selling an idea that things are moving through a two-dimensional space, a static image, that things are moving. All right, it creates that idea of motion, and that's the best way to use motion blur within your photography. So again, I hope this helps you, Martin. I hope this helps everybody else on understanding why I use motion blur in my images and how I create that effect of motion that is more realistic, or it's more convincing with regards to the concepts that we create. Hope this helps. Go out, give it a shot. Leave comments below. Let me know how you feel about motion blur and how you feel about using it, how it works for you. So go do that, and I'll see you next time on Photillustrator TV.